Welcome to The Drum. I'm Steve Cannane. Coming up, will the UN impose a no-fly zone over Libya? The federal government's top climate change advisor argues for great big new tax cuts. And with just a few pots and pans and some M&Ms, Glenn Beck shows you how nuclear power really works. Our panel tonight, documentary maker Tony Barrell, Victorian Labor MP Jane Garrett and Liberal councillor Tim Smith. First up tonight to the latest news from Japan, and heavy snowfalls are hampering the search effort in the quake and tsunami zone. The death toll now stands at almost 5,200 people, with about 8,500 people still missing. And the new US Nuclear Regulatory Commission has warned of potentially lethal radiation doses at the damaged Fukushima plant. Military helicopters have been spraying water to cool the reactors.
Regarding the water spraying for the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, we have completed the morning portion of these operations. Self-Defense Force conducted the spraying of water from the air, and the police are also going to start the water spraying by the water cannon trucks. So we are trying to combine these two approaches to maximize the effect of water spraying.
And underlying just how serious the situation has become, Japan's reclusive Emperor Akihito has spoken publicly on the nuclear crisis.
The accident at nuclear power plant causes deep worry, and I hope the efforts by staff can avert the situation getting worse.
Tony, you wrote a piece for Rolling Stones about a decade ago now, talking about the issue of building nuclear reactors on quake zones in Japan. Why was there so little scrutiny about it?
Well, there was plenty of scrutiny amongst the people who were affected by it, but they didn't have much of an audience for their suspicions and complaints about what became a juggernaut, actually. I think it's the best way to describe what was going on from really the late 1950s onwards to make Japan more dependent on nuclear power than it was any other kind of way of making electricity. In fact, the original plan meant that they were supposed to have half their electricity generated by nuclear power by last year.
And it's now about a third, isn't it?
It's just over a third, yeah, it's about 35%.
So a lot of these reactors were built in the 70s, designed in the 60s, designed at a time when they were working out how nuclear reactors were safe and not safe, and the areas that needed looking at. Why can't they replace them? What's the issue here? Why are they so out of date?
Well, one of the reasons is cost, I think. I think the utilities who've been running them have been reluctant to replace them because it costs so much money to replace them. Not only to build a new reactor, which takes years, but to decommission the one that's reached its use-by date. And they take years to decommission as well.
How long does it take to decommission them?
Well, there's only one being decommissioned in Japan at the moment, and that's a bit south of Fukushima, at a place called Tokaimura. And I think they started doing it quite a few years ago, but altogether it's going to take 17 years until it becomes inert. That's a long time.
That's a very long time. Jane, it's now left up to a select group of workers who are trying to get electricity back operating into these power plants to pump that water in. That's incredible pressure on those workers, isn't it?
Look, I think it's been one of the stories, of the most heroic stories of this terrible tragedy. Those workers are risking their lives, clearly, on an hourly basis to try and get water in to address the problems with the instability in the plant.
Some people are calling it a suicide mission.
Well, it may well be, and they are to be absolutely commended for their bravery, because their bravery will potentially and hopefully save the living conditions and the lives of many around them.
Tim?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a particularly scary job to try and fix up a nuclear power station that's clearly under some degree of stress at the moment. The Japanese economy is one of the most carbon efficient economies in the world. So in some respects at the moment you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't with nuclear power. My observations at the moment throughout this whole crisis has been that I think we've got 8,000 people missing still, we've got 5,000 people dead, and the main story here is about nuclear power. The story should be about rebuilding these people's lives. This nuclear debate will come and it will go. The regulatory issues will come and they will go. Should they have built a nuclear power station on a fault line? Well, we'll have that argument in good time. But at the end of the day, the Japanese are suffering a crisis. Our country is supporting them. And I think that's where we should be talking at the moment, not about coulda, shoulda, woulda with nuclear energy.
But I guess there's an ongoing part of this story too, Tony, and that's the exposure to radiation and the information and whether that's getting out to the Japanese people. I mean, we're getting conflicting messages about what's a safe zone. The US is advising their citizens not to stay within 80 kilometres. The Japanese are saying 20 to 30 kilometres.
Well, I think that fits in with the people's understanding and experience of how things have been explained to them in the past. To be frank, the Japanese have been kept in the dark and fed on the usual. There have been several nuclear accidents in Japan, nothing like what we're experiencing at the moment, and to suggest we should be ignoring that because it's, you know, an irrelevant debate is, I think, a bit, well, fatuous, actually. But the idea that there is open information in Japan about where and what nuclear power is doing is the real problem. People have not been told over the years, and this is endemic. It goes right back to the beginning. So one needs to know a bit of the history of it. I mean, for instance, it was extraordinary